Hi, Lonnie Vaughn with Emotiva Audio here. Today we're going to talk a little bit about EQs. It's a wonderful tool that can be used for a variety of things to help you maximize and get the most out of your system. But if you look on the web, there's a whole lot of misinformation out there. And what I want to try and do is simplify all of this, because there are certain aspects about an EQ that a lot of people don't understand. There's things they do and things they don't. And when they look at and they're searching out on the web about how to use them, when to use them, and what to do with it, and all that kind of stuff, there's so much bogus stuff out there. So let's talk a little bit about, first off, what an EQ is and what its different properties are. Then I'll give you some basic guidelines about what an EQ can do and what an EQ can't do, because I think that's even more important. People rely too much on them, but they are useful, and I'll start off with what makes an EQ what it actually is. Now, an EQ by nature is just a tuned resonant circuit. Big technical term for it oscillates at a given frequency to either give you boost or cut at that specific frequency. Now, an EQ is made up of three parts. First is frequency. Everybody understands that aspect of it. You know, your audio band runs from 20 to 20K, and most everybody pretty well gets the whole frequency part of it. Now, level is the second aspect of it. You can either boost it or cut it, okay? There's pros and cons to both boosting and cutting. I'm a big proponent of only using a boost when it's absolutely necessary. Typically, when I set up systems, all I ever do is use the cut, unless I have no other option for certain things that are going on. And we'll get into a little more of that in a little bit. It's the third aspect that most people have the biggest problem with, and that is Q. What is Q? Well, in its simplest term, Q is bandwidth. How wide of an area do we want to actually adjust when we do our level and cut? Are we going to do a real narrow band, or are we going to do a big broad section? What are we going to do? Well, that's what Q comes in. And in the old parametrics, or not parametrics, in the old graphic EQs, if you remember, they all had either a knob or a slider. And the Q was already preset in the device. So you just had your frequency and you had your boost or cut. So everybody got that. With modern day gear, now you have to tell it, what do I want for a Q? And while the formula for calculating Q is actually really simple, understanding what's in the formula is a little more complex than what we're going to get into today. So what I did was, we've got a cheat sheet here for you. If you want to do 2 octaves, Q is 0.7. And we got it down to a 1/8 octave, which is a Q of 11.2. Think of it in terms of being the inverse of what you would normally think. The higher the number, the narrower the area that it's going to adjust, okay? And when we say an octave, what is an octave? For those who may not know, an octave is any given frequency. I don't care what it is. Let's take 1,000 hertz. It's a real simple number. 1,000 hertz, 1 octave means it goes double that frequency going forward and cut it in half going back. So if you're tuning a 1 octave circuit, which would be a Q of 1.4, and if we had 1,000 hertz, that means that when we make our adjustment on level, we're actually going to be starting off at 2K, and it's going to go all the way down to 500, okay? So that's all that Q is, how wide, and the octaves that go along with it. Just follow this, then you don't have to worry about it. You can just follow these guidelines and set it up very simply. Now, a few things. Let's go over what an EQ can't do. Just real quick. Few basic guidelines, and your system will always sound good. First, an EQ cannot fix poor design, okay? If your basic sound system in your room has enormous acoustic anomalies because of reflections, absorptions, things like that. I don't care what you do, an EQ can't fix that. That comes back to fundamental acoustics. An EQ is more of a tuning device to take care of specific aspects, not a broadband fix. So, can't fix poor design. Number two, you can't make a poor speaker sound like an expensive speaker. It's just not possible. We spend thousands of hours tuning our speakers, making sure that the integration from the woofer to the mid-range to the tweeter is properly phased and in proper levels, and that the transitional points are all smooth across the bandwidth and all that kind of stuff. I see on the web all the time, don't spend your money on the expensive speakers. Go buy the cheap speakers. Let the REW Room EQ take care of it. It's not going to fix that. It can't make a poorly designed speaker sound like an expensive speaker. So don't try. Let your speakers be who they are, and we're going to take care of just the rough edges, okay? Third thing to remember, and this one I think is probably the most important aspect. Less is more. And what I mean by that is I see it, and I talk to people all the time. It's a very common misconception. What they do is they try to fix something, and then they fix the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing, and they're trying to get to this mythical flat response in their room. The more you do, the worse it's going to sound. Because what people don't understand is an EQ, whether it's done in the analog realm or in the digital realm, they have the same attributes. As you use that tuned circuit, it introduces certain phase relationship aspects that weren't there before. There's all kinds of anomalies that come into play. They're not a perfect tuned circuit, and it can't be made that way just because of what they are. So less is always more. Fix only the worst parts, the worst aspects. Get rid of them, and then let your system will always sound good. Use the fewest number of EQs you can per channel, and you'll always be happy with it. I guess the next aspect is you can't fix a null. In a video I did not too long ago, I was talking about subwoofers and how if you have a single subwoofer in your room, given the physical dimensions of the space, there is going to be a frequency at which the wavelengths cancel. And it's going to cause a big heavy dip in your response of your room. That's referred to as a null. You cannot drive enough energy into a null to fix it. So when you see this in your graph and you see this null point, don't try to boost this frequency, to whatever, to try and fix this, because it's an acoustic attribute of the room itself. And you can't put enough energy because it'll just keep canceling out. So don't try. You're just wasting your time. The next thing to look at is what you really want to focus on. When you see this, this is actually not an unusual curve that you would see in a room. What I do is I focus on just trying to get rid of the bad stuff, okay? When you see dips, things like this, I kind of refer to them like gradual dips as being sins of omission. That's just me. The thing about that is we don't pick up on it unless it's really severe, okay? The mind integrates it all together. Life is grand. What I try to focus on are the peaks. Like that. Especially when it's in the mid-range area, vocals, things like that. Those stand out. Peaks always stand out. Dips rarely get noticed, okay? So I try to focus when I'm working on this kind of stuff is just fixing the bad stuff. And when I say cut out the bad stuff, that's what I'm referring to. Bringing that level down so that you get a smoother response across the board. So you want to cut it. Trying to boost this, yes you can. That's not a severe dip. You could boost it, you could try to bring it up, but most likely it's not going to make it sound that much different. So I don't even focus on that kind of thing. The next thing I would actually like you to keep in mind is when you reach the end, just stop. When you're looking at 20K, 20 hertz, it's normal to see a roll-off like this. And that has a lot to do with microphone, okay? The microphone versus our ears, placement of the microphone, all that kind of stuff, all right? Take the tweeter, for instance. You see a roll-off like this. That doesn't mean that the tweeter itself isn't reproducing the frequencies out here. It's just the microphone's not picking it up because it's off axis to the tweeter itself. Another thing that the tweeter can't, or that a microphone can't do, is a microphone is a single point of acquisition. Our ears aren't. We pick up spatial cues, all kinds of things that the microphone can't determine. So if you take this, you're looking at it, and you're going, oh man, I have to boost this to get this up there so I can get my 20K. A couple of things are going on. The mic's just not picking it up. Your speakers are actually playing it, okay? And if you try to boost it, all you're doing is dumping a whole lot of energy into your tweeters. And I have seen it where people put so much boost in there just to try and make it look good on a graph that they've roasted their tweeters. The thing is, the tweeters are actually playing normal, and the way we hear things, we're going to pick up on a lot of those spatial cues that the microphone won't. So I don't even try to fix this because I know this is just what the microphone is hearing, okay? Down here on the bottom end, it kind of falls along the same lines. It's natural for woofer to start rolling off at whatever point it was designed to do in the cabinet, okay? If you're saying that I have to make it play down to 20 hertz, you're probably just wasting energy because you're going to boost this up to try and push this out a little further, and that's going to cause the amp inside the subwoofer to increase its power output exponentially. The actual cone travel of the woofer itself goes up on an enormous rate, and there's not really that much information there. In fact, there's relatively nothing ever. You know, a good kick drum is about 100 hertz. Electronic music, bass from electronic music, things like that, typically center around 45 hertz, which is usually the sweet spot of what most subwoofers can do. I don't even try to get it to go down that low. If it does, great. If it doesn't, don't worry about it because you're not really missing out on anything. It's just reality. So when you get to the end, just stop. Don't even try to fix those because it's just, there's nothing there. You're either going to make things worse or you're not going to get any benefit from it. The next thing to keep in mind is don't sweat the small stuff. And this is another thing that people do. I did it back in the old days too, so I'm guilty of it. You fix this. You try to fix that. You try to fix that. And it keeps going. Try to fix this, that, and the other to get to this mythical flat response. Now in the old days, showing my age here, I used to do car audio competitions a lot. Built a lot of show cars, things like that, and competed quite a bit. And there was a rule. You know, you got points taken off for every dB that you were off from a flat response. Because back in those days, everybody believed that's what we had to hit. We had to get a flat response in order to make it sound good. So you'd spend days and days and days tuning it and tuning it and tuning it. You go in, they test it. Yay, you got a perfect score. You roll out of the lane. You're driving home. You put in something to listen to. And honestly, it just sounded awful. I mean, it's just reality. We don't hear at a flat response. That's not how the ears work. That's not how the mind interpolates sound. So I guess what I'm trying to say is don't sweat all the little things trying to correct everything to get a flat response, because all you're going to do is just make things sound worse and worse and worse, and it's going to be an endless cycle of trying to fix it. So don't even try. Let your speakers sound like what they are. You bought them for a reason. They sounded a way you liked. So let them be what they are. Just take care of the nasty stuff that pops up because it's dealing in a room. So, with those guidelines in mind, okay, those are the things an EQ can't do. What should you use an EQ for? Two things: overall tonal balance and taking care of peaks. Now, we already addressed the peaks a little bit. Overall tonal balance is, I kind of group that into integrating my subwoofer into my main speakers, things along those lines, okay? Now, how do you set your EQ once you have this to go? Well, let's say we do want to fix this peak. Well, this peak is centered at 1 kilohertz. It's not a very broad peak. So we're going to look at our graph and see, well, what's these two frequencies? Let's just say hypothetically, this is 500, and this one, well, it's not 2K, let's say 1.5K, whatever. I'm just using numbers here. So what you want to do is you want to look at this and say, I'm dealing with something shy of 1 octave, maybe half an octave would probably solve my problem here. So all I have to do is use this to go 2.8 for my Q, my frequency is 1K, and I'm going to bring it down 1.5 dB. You do that, and it's going to give you something more along the lines of that. Smooth it all out. You can't fix the null, so don't try. What you want to do is take this, let's say this is 45 hertz, this is 30 whatever, and 80 hertz, right? So again, what we're looking at is less than an octave. So we could go with 2.8, maybe 3.5. You can adjust it. It's in the processor. You can set your point. So you set your frequency at 45, or wherever the center point is that you want to adjust. Give it your Q, say 3, and we're going to bring it down just a little because I like a nice deep bass, but I don't want to bring it down too much. So we're just going to say -1 dB. And then that will probably give me something along the lines of that. Problem solved, done. That would be the only two things I would fix in this entire graph. You can do more, but for everything that you add, there are trade-offs. So keep it less is more. So hopefully this has been helpful to you. I know that you guys know some of the basics, but a lot of people get confused with this. So follow the cheat sheet, keep it simple, and do just what you have to do to take the rough edges off, and it will always sound great. Hopefully this has been helpful to you, and we'll have some other videos coming down the road to help show you about how you get your graphs. Have a great day.